Your awareness returns to your body in stages, unhurried and patient. You become conscious of the weight of the wool blanket that covers you, its fibers coarse against your bare arms, but warm in a way that feels like an old, reliable companion. Underneath you, the mattress is a simple sack stuffed with straw, and it rustles with a whisper each time your breathing shifts. The flagstone floor beside the bed is cool, a smooth grey slab warmed to a gentle polish by many feet over many years, and you know without touching it exactly how it will feel against the soles of your feet when you finally rise. That coolness is its own kind of invitation, a promise that the day will begin in calmness and proceed without hurry. You lie still for a long moment, letting the room take shape around you. A wooden stool stands against the wall, draped with the clothes you wore yesterday, simple garments of coarse linen and cotton that hold the shape of your body even now. A clay jug and a small basin rest on a low shelf, their surfaces catching the faintest glimmer of the gathering light. The door is a heavy plank of chestnut wood, set into the stone wall with iron hinges that have darkened with age, and beyond it a short corridor leads to the outer door that opens directly onto the lane. The town outside is beginning to make its first small sounds, though all of them are softened by the thick walls and the distance. Somewhere down the hill, a cockerel announces the morning, but the sound is muffled and far away, as though the bird itself is still half asleep. Then, from higher up, where the monastery stands at the very top of the town, the single deep note of a bell rings out. It is not a loud or urgent sound, just one clear tone that vibrates through the air and then fades, leaving behind a silence that feels fuller than before. The bell does not ring again. It marks the hour of early prayer and then rests, as if it too understands that this is a place where time moves slowly. You push back the blanket, and the cool air touches your skin with a gentle persistence. Your feet find the flagstone floor, and the sensation is exactly as you knew it would be, a smooth mineral coolness that anchors you to the earth beneath the house. You stand, and the straw in the mattress sighs as your weight leaves it. Across the room, the window is now a rectangle of pale grey sky, and if you step close to it, you can see the first suggestion of colour beginning to appear low on the horizon. A faint wash of lemon and rose that will deepen as the sun climbs. The view from the window is one you have seen every morning for years, yet it never insists on being remarkable. It simply is. The lane below is a ribbon of stone, its cobbles fitted together with a craftsman's patience centuries ago, now worn smooth and cupped in places where rainfall has pooled and slowly carved its own designs. Across the lane, the facing houses are shuttered, their wooden doors closed, their roofs covered with terracotta tiles that have faded to a soft, dusty orange. Above them, the hillside rises in a series of terraces supported by dry stone walls, each terrace holding a grove of olive trees whose silver-green leaves are utterly still in the windless dawn. And further still, far below the town, beyond the last of the terraces and the last of the winding paths, the Tyrrhenian Sea stretches out towards the northern horizon, a broad expanse of water that at this hour is a single unbroken sheet of blue-grey satin, calm and undisturbed. You stand there for a while, your hands resting on the cool stone of the windowsill, your breathing slow and deep. The thought of the sea, so quiet this morning, sits in your mind like a half-remembered dream. You know that out there, somewhere beyond the edge of sight, fishermen are already mending their nets and preparing their boats, but from this height the water gives no hint of any activity. It is as if the sea itself is still sleeping, its surface untouched by wind or wake. After a time you turn from the window and begin the slow ritual of dressing. The clothes from the stool are picked up one at a time, examined with an unhurried care. The linen shirt is soft from many washings, its fibres worn thin at the elbows but still serviceable. You pull it over your head and feel the familiar way it settles across your shoulders, the loose weave allowing the air to move freely against your skin. The trousers are of a heavier cotton, dyed a dark brown that has faded over the seasons, and you fasten them with a simple cord that you tie in a secure knot at your waist. Finally, you take up the woolen waistcoat, not because the day will be cold, but because the mornings in the press room can be cool until the sun climbs high enough to warm the stones. You button it slowly, your fingers moving from one button to the next with the ease of long practice. A pair of leather sandals waits by the door, their soles shaped by the specific shape of your feet. You slip into them, feeling the cool leather against your skin. And then you lift the wooden latch and open the inner door. The corridor is narrow and dark, its walls close enough to touch on both sides, and at the far end the outer door stands closed, a thin line of daylight visible along its bottom edge. You walk the few steps to it, the sound of your sandals on the stone floor, a soft, flat tapping that does not echo. When you open the outer door, the morning air washes over you in a gentle wave, carrying the mingled smells of stone dust, damp earth from the potted herbs on the neighbor's step, and the faint, distant salt of the sea. You step out into the lane and stand for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the open sky. The street rises to your right, climbing in a series of shallow steps towards the monastery whose bell you heard earlier, and falls to your left, twisting down between shuttered houses towards the old fountain and, beyond it, the quarter where the olive press stands. You turn left and begin to walk, your pace measured and unhurried, each step taking you deeper into the quiet life of the town as it stirs around you. The houses you pass are built of the same grey limestone, their facades plain and unadorned save for the occasional iron bracket that holds a lantern, now extinguished. Some have small windows set deep into the walls, and through one of them you glimpse the flicker of a candle flame, a sign that someone else is beginning their day. But no voices are heard, no doors open to break the stillness. The town wakes gently in its own time, a community of people who have learned that nothing good comes from rushing the dawn. You reach the baker's shop, its heavy wooden door still closed and barred. The oven, however, has been lit. You can tell by the faint warmth that radiates from the wall and the subtle, nutty scent of yesterday's loaves that still lingers in the air. The baker will open later, after the dough has risen and the first batch of bread has been shaped, and by then you will be deep in your own work. You pass the shop and continue down the lane, the surface underfoot changing from worn cobbles to broad, shallow steps that have been polished by countless footsteps. The sound of your sandals is soft to hear, almost a whisper. The fountain comes into view at the next turn, a simple stone basin set into a recess in the wall, fed by a pipe that brings water from a spring higher up the hill. The water flows continuously, a slender, silvery stream that arcs from the pipe and falls into the basin with a low, liquid murmur that you have known all your life. You stop, as you always do, and cup your hands under the stream, bringing the cool water to your face. The sensation is a small shock of clarity, a rinsing away of the last traces of sleep. You drink a few handfuls of the water, tasting the mineral purity of the hillside, and then you continue on your way, the coolness still damp on your cheeks and forehead. The lane narrows after the fountain, the houses pressing closer together so that the sky above becomes a pale ribbon between the eaves. Here the shadows are deeper, and the air holds the coolness of the night a little longer. A cat, grey and lean, watches you from a windowsill with eyes that are slow to blink, utterly indifferent to your passing. You acknowledge it with a slight nod, a habit you cannot recall forming, and the cat looks away, its attention caught by something invisible in the stones. At last the lane opens out into a small piazza, and there, on the far side, is the low stone arch that leads into the olive press. The workshop is set into the ground floor of an old building, its walls thicker than any of the houses around it, its roof of heavy timber beams that have darkened with age and absorbed decades of the press's scented air. The wooden door under the arch is closed but not locked, and you push it open with the flat of your hand, feeling the familiar resistance of the iron hinge and the slight scrape of the bottom edge against the stone threshold. Inside, the workshop waits in silence. The tall shutters on the windows are still closed, so the light is dim, falling in thin vertical lines through the gaps between the planks. The air is cool and still, and it carries the deep, bittersweet perfume of olive oil that has seeped into every surface over the years, the wooden beams, the packed earth floor, the stack of woven mats, the great screw of the press itself. It is a smell that you associate with peace, with long hours of patient work, with the steady rhythm of the turning year. You stand just inside the doorway and let your eyes adjust. The shapes of the room resolve slowly, the great wooden press standing like a sleeping animal in the center of the space, its beam horizontal and supported by two thick uprights. The pile of fibre mats, the fiscally, stacked neatly on a low bench. The rows of clay storage jars, their dark mouths open, their sides stained with the golden traces of last season's oil. And in the corner, the mound of olive stones, bleached pale and clean, left over from the previous pressing and now as dry as bone. Everything is in its place, orderly and waiting, and the only sound is the soft, distant murmur of the fountain carried through the stone walls from the piazza outside. You walk across the room, your sandals making a soft, gritty sound on the dried mud of the floor. Reaching the first of the tall shutters, you lift the iron bar that holds it closed and swing the wooden panel outward, securing it to the iron hook fixed to the outer wall. The light that enters is not yet direct sunlight, but the full, even glow of the morning sky, and it falls in a broad slant across the room, illuminating the dust motes that hang in the air like tiny specks of gold. You open the second shutter, and then the third, until the whole workshop is filled with a gentle, honey-colored illumination that makes the space feel as calm as a library or a chapel. Standing in the middle of the room, you breathe in the cool, oil-scented silence, and the thought of the day's task settles into your mind. It is not a pressing thought, not a demand or a worry, but simply a quiet awareness of the work that lies ahead, as familiar and reliable as the weight of a favorite tool in the hand. You will wash the olives that wait under their damp cloth in the corner, you will lead the donkey to the mill and begin the slow turning of the great stone wheel, you will spread the paste on the mats and load the heavy limestone weights onto the press beam. And you will listen, in the long quiet of the afternoon, to the soft dripping of the oil as it separates and gathers. All of this is known to you, each step a part of a rhythm that has been repeated for generations in this room, in this town, on this hillside above the calm sea. You roll up the sleeves of your linen shirt, first the right, then the left, folding the fabric with slow precision until it rests just below your elbows. The water jug is where it always is, beside the stack of clean basins, and you lift it with both hands, feeling its weight and the coolness of the clay against your palms. Pouring water into the largest basin, you watch the clear liquid rise, its surface trembling slightly with the movement, and then you set the jug down and let the ripples settle. The day's work, which will be long and gentle and entirely uneventful, is about to begin, and you are ready, as you have always been ready, to meet it with the same patience and the same peace that the press itself holds in its ancient wooden frame. The water in the basin has settled to perfect stillness, a small round pool that reflects the pale morning light from the open shutters, and you stand beside it without moving, your hands resting on the cool edge of the stone workbench. The workshop around you has received the day's first full brightness, and now, in this quiet interval before any labor begins, you allow your awareness to spread outward from the water jug and the basin, and take in the whole of the room with a slow, unhurried attention. This is a moment you have learned to value over the years, a pause between the arrival and the beginning, when the space speaks only of its own long history, and the patience embedded in every surface. The great wooden press dominates the center of the room, as it has done for longer than anyone in the town can remember. Its two upright beams are chestnut trunks squared with adzes long ago, their surfaces darkened to a deep, smoky brown and worn smooth, where countless hands have brushed against them. The horizontal beam, the one that carries the pressure downward onto the stack of mats, is even darker, almost black in its deepest grain lines, and it rests now in its idle position, suspended parallel to the floor by the thick iron screw that rises through its center. The screw itself is a wonder of patient craft, its threads cut by hand into the dense heartwood, each spiral deep and clean and still faintly greasy to the touch from the oil that has been used to lubricate it over the generations. At the top of the screw, a large wooden capstan, shaped like a ship's wheel, but simpler, waits with its protruding handles, each one polished by the grip of the workers who came before you. When the press is in use, the capstan is turned to bring the beam down slowly, but today, with the stones loaded instead, the capstan remains still, a silent partner in the day's work. You let your gaze travel from the press to the wall behind it, where a collection of large limestone weights is arranged in a careful row against the plaster. Each stone is roughly rectangular, rounded at the edges, and they vary in size from ones you can lift with one arm to heavier blocks that require both hands and a steady stance. Their surfaces are a matte, weathered grey, mottled with paler flecks of calcite, and in the low morning light they seem almost soft, like pillows carved from the bones of the hill itself. A fine white dust The residue of limestone, slowly abraded by movement and time, has settled in the crevices of the floor around them, and you know that by the end of the day your hands will be coated with the same fine powder, a dry mineral film that feels clean rather than dirty. Beside the weights, leaning against the wall, are the long wooden poles used for leverage when the heaviest stones need to be shifted. They are simple lengths of olive wood, stripped of bark and smoothed with use, their ends slightly splayed from bearing against stone and beam. You notice, as you always do, that one of them has a small split near its top, a crack that has not widened in 3 seasons, but which you monitor with a quiet, habitual glance each morning. The tools of this workshop are not many, but each one has a known personality, a known history, and you treat them all with the same gentle regard you would offer an old and trusted companion. The stack of woven fibre mats, the fiscally, occupies the low wooden bench against the left-hand wall. There are perhaps 30 of them, each one a flat disc of coarse hemp fibre woven in concentric rings, stiff from repeated use and dyed a deep amber by the oil that has saturated their fibres over many pressings. You can see the variations among them. Some are darker, older, their edges frayed into a soft fringe. Others are newer, their weave still tight and their colour closer to the natural tan of raw hemp. They are stacked with a spacer of thin wooden slats between each one so that air can circulate and prevent mould, and the whole pile exudes a sharp, slightly fermented scent that mingles with the broader perfume of the room. When you lift one later, you know it will have a pleasant rough texture against your palms, like a very stiff cloth, and it will hold the memory of every pressing in its fibres as a kind of olfactory record. Below the bench, the packed earth floor is swept clean, its surface hard and smooth from decades of feet and the occasional spill of water that has been absorbed and then compacted. You can see the faint undulations where the earth has settled around the foundation stones of the walls, and in one corner, near the door, there is a small depression that has worn deeper over time, a place where the rainwater sometimes drips from the threshold. A simple broom of bound twigs rests against the wall beside the door, its bristles worn to an angled slant, and a wooden bucket with iron bands sits upside down, dry and ready. The rows of clay storage jars stand along the back wall, where the light is dimmest and the air stays cool even in the height of summer. They are large vessels, each one capable of holding many litres of oil, their shapes slightly irregular from the posser's wheel, their rims thickened for strength. The dark stains that ring their mouths and run in vertical streaks down their sides are not a defect but a patina of honour, the mark of successive seasons of oil that have overflowed or been dripped during the careful process of decanting. You can trace the different hues in the stains. Some are a bright golden brown from the first pressing of young olives. Others are deeper, greener, from later harvests when the fruit was riper and the oil carried a more peppery bite. The jars are stoppered with thick discs of cork that have been waxed around the edges with beeswax, and each cork is labelled with a small piece of broken tile on which a date has been scratched in the soft clay before firing. The labels are faded but legible, a private calendar of seasons past. In the far corner, heaped against the junction of the 2 outer walls, is the pile of olive stones left over from the previous year. They are countless, a small mountain of pale, woody nuggets, each one oval and slightly pointed, their surfaces grooved with the fine lines left by the crushing stone. The pile is completely dry now, the last of the fruit's flesh long since consumed by the press or by the small insects that live in the cool darkness of the workshop. The stones are a uniform pale cream colour, bleached by air and time, and when you handle them, they rattle with a dry, hollow sound, like tiny pebbles. They will be used as fuel in the winter, burned in the small brazier that warms the workshop on the coldest days, and their smoke will carry the faint, bitter ghost of the oil they once held. You shift your weight slightly, and the movement causes a floorboard on the press platform to creak once, a low, familiar sound that hangs in the air and then fades. Above you, the ceiling is a lattice of heavy timber beams, rough-hewn and joined with wooden pegs, their upper surfaces lost in shadow. Swallows have built their mud nests in the angles of the beams, and though the nests are empty now, you can see the traces of last season's occupation, the white streaks of droppings on the wood, the small tufts of dried grass and feather still clinging to the mud. The birds will return when the weather turns, and their quiet chirping will become another layer in the workshop's quiet soundscape, together with the grinding of the millstone and the drip of the oil. The scent of the room continues to reveal itself the longer you stand still. At first, it is the dominant note of old olive oil, a rich, slightly bitter fragrance that seems to emanate from the very walls. But beneath that there are other layers. The dry, dusty smell of the packed earth floor, the cool, metallic tang of the iron fittings on the press, the faint, sweet aroma of the beeswax on the jar corks, and, drifting in from the open shutters, the clean, green scent of the herb-covered hillside, the wild rosemary and thyme that grow in such abundance on the terraces. These smells combine into a single, complex atmosphere that is as much a part of the workshop as the stone and the wood, a presence that you breathe in with each slow inhalation and carry with you through the day. Your eye falls now on the small details that a casual visitor might miss, but which define the space for you. There is a crack in the plaster of the north wall that runs from the windowsill to the floor, a jagged line that has been there since the winter of the great storm and has not widened since. There is a dark knot in the wood of the press beam that resembles, if you look at it with a half-dreaming gaze, the profile of a sleeping cat. There is a small niche cut into the wall beside the door, too shallow to hold anything large, in which a little clay lamp sits, its wick long since burned away, but its reservoir still faintly sticky with oil. And there is, on the floor just beneath the stack of fiscally, a faint circular stain, darker than the surrounding earth, where a jar of oil was accidentally tipped over many years ago and the liquid soaked into the ground before it could be fully cleaned. The stain is a permanent record, a small marker of a moment that has long since passed, and it will remain there for as long as the workshop stands. You become aware now of the quality of the silence. It is not an absolute silence, for the workshop is never entirely still. The phantom outside in the piazza continues its soft, liquid murmur, a sound so constant that it has become a form of quietness in itself. From somewhere up the hillside comes the distant, musical clunk of a goat bell, irregular and drowsy. The wooden beams of the ceiling make occasional small ticking sounds, as they have done every day for centuries, expanding or contracting with the changing temperature. A fly buzzes lazily in the far corner, its flight a low drone that rises and falls. All of these sounds merge into a gentle, ongoing hum that is the true voice of the workshop, a sound that asks nothing of you and offers everything. You take a deeper breath, feeling the cool, oil-scented air fill your lungs, and you let it out slowly, watching the way the light from the windows catches the fine dust that your exhalation stirs. The dust motes drift and swirl in slow, aimless patterns, each one a tiny speck of limestone or dried olive skin or powdered earth, suspended in the air like a constellation of miniature stars. You have watched this dance of dust many times, and it never fails to settle your thoughts into a quiet alignment with the pace of the room. Time, in here, is measured not by the sun's movement across the sky, but by the slow dripping of oil and the patient settling of dust. Your hands move from the edge of the workbench and hang loosely at your sides, and you feel the weight of your own body, the solid press of your feet against the packed earth, the cool air on your forearms where the rolled sleeves have exposed the skin. You entirely present, entirely calm, a part of the workshop just as the press and the jars and the stacked mats are parts of it. The day stretches ahead of you like a long, straight road across a level plain, with no obstacles and no destinations other than the moment when the last jar is stoppered and the shutters are closed again. There is no urgency, no pressure, no expectation beyond the simple sequence of tasks that you will perform with the same care they have always received. You glance once more at the great wooden press, at the waiting stack of mats, at the limestone weights resting against the wall, and you feel a quiet sense of readiness. Everything is in order, everything is in its proper place, and the only thing missing is the beginning. But the beginning, you know, will come in its own time, just as the morning light will strengthen and the day will warm and the oil will eventually begin its slow, steady seep. For now, there is only this, the cool, oil-scented silence of the workshop in the old quarter, the soft murmur of the fountain, the patient stillness of the wooden beam, and the stacked mats and the darkened jars, and you, standing in their midst, breathing gently, asking nothing more than what is already here. The cool, oil-scented silence of the workshop holds you for a while longer as you stand beside the workbench with the basin of still water. But gradually, without any conscious decision, your body begins to lean towards the next small movement. The day will not start itself, and though there is no hurry and no urgency, there is the quiet satisfaction of the first task waiting to be done. You turn away from the press and the stacked mats and the rows of dark jars, and you walk across the packed earth floor towards the corner where the mound of yesterday's olives rests under its damp cloth, a shape like a low, rounded hillock that has been waiting patiently through the night. The cloth that covers the olives is a piece of coarse linen, old and softened by many washings, its edges frayed into a fine white fringe. It has been soaked in cool water and wrung out so that it remains damp but not dripping, and its purpose is simple: to keep the olives fresh and cool, to prevent the fruit from heating and beginning to ferment before the press can receive it. When you lift one corner of the cloth, the smell that rises is immediate and vivid, a green, grassy fragrance with a faint peppery sharpness that seems to fill your nose and then spread, soft and clean, through the whole of your awareness. It is the smell of fruit, still alive, still holding the memory of the tree, the sun, and the thin, stony soil of the terraced hillside. You fold the cloth back carefully, lifting it away from the mound and draping it over the edge of a nearby barrel, and the olives are revealed in their full quantity, a heap of small, oval fruits that glisten faintly in the morning light. Their colors are a quiet range of green and purple and deep, dusky black, depending on how ripe each one was when it was picked. Some are a bright, waxy green, firm and hard. Others have begun to darken, their skins taking on the purplish bloom of the halfway stage, and a few, the ones that were gathered from the ground beneath the trees rather than combed from the branches, are fully black and slightly soft, their flesh yielding to the gentlest pressure. The heap is a mixture of varieties, the way the old orchards always produce, because the trees on the terraces were planted by different hands in different generations, and no one has ever thought to separate one type from another. You stand above the mound and look at it with the calm, assessing gaze of someone who has done this work many times. The first part of the task is not washing, but sorting, a slow picking over of the fruit to remove anything that does not belong. You pull a low wooden stool from against the wall, its seat polished to a warm brown sheen by long use, and you set it beside the heap. Then you sit down, feeling the solidity of the stool beneath you, and you lean forward, your hands reaching into the mound with the gentle, knowing touch of a worker who respects the fruit. The olives are cool against your fingers, their skins smooth and sometimes faintly dusty, carrying the fine pale bloom that comes from the tree itself. You begin to sort, your hands moving through the heap in slow, deliberate passes, and the first things you remove are the leaves. They are small, leathery olive leaves, silver green on one side and paler on the other, their edges smooth and unbroken. Some are still attached to tiny twigs, and these you set aside in a separate pile that will be thrown onto the stone pile later for burning. The leaves have a different smell from the fruit, drier and more herbal, and they rustle faintly as you gather them together, a papery sound that mixes with the soft clack and tumble of the olives themselves. Next you remove the stems, the little woody caps that held each olive to its branch. Most of them have already separated during the picking, but some cling stubbornly, and you pinch them off one by one with your thumb and forefinger, dropping them into the same pile as the leaves. The stems are thin and stiff, their broken ends sharp if you press them the wrong way, and you handle them with a light touch, your movements slow and repetitive, the rhythm of the work already beginning to settle into a steady, calming pulse. The final and most careful part of the sorting is the removal of the olives that have spoiled. You find them one at a time, your fingers recognizing them before your eyes do. An olive that has gone bad feels different. Its skin has lost its smooth tension and become wrinkled, sagging inward over flesh that has begun to break down. When you press it gently, the fruit yields too much, and a faint sour smell, vinegary and sharp, rises from the split skin. You collect these in a small clay bowl that you keep beside the stool, a bowl that by the end of the sorting will hold perhaps 24 rejected fruits, no more. The harvest has been good this season, the fruit sound and healthy, and the losses are few. The spoiled olives will be taken outside later and scattered on the compost heap behind the workshop, where they will break down into the earth and nourish the wild herbs that grow there. The sorting continues, unhurried and methodical, your hands moving through the olives with the same patient care you would use to clean a treasured object. You pick out a small pebble that has found its way into the heap, a smooth grey stone, no larger than an olive itself, worn round by the terraces. You set it aside on the windowsill, a small gesture of tidiness, and then your hands return to the fruit. The pile of sorted olives on one side grows steadily larger, while the heap of unsorted fruit on the other side shrinks at the same quiet pace. There is no need to count, no need to measure. The work progresses at its own speed, and the speed is always exactly right. When the sorting is finished, you sit back on the stool and let your hands rest on your knees, the fingers still faintly sticky with the residue of olive juice. The sorted heap is clean and uniform, a tumble of sound fruit in its quiet range of greens and purples and blacks, and the pile of leaves and stems beside the stool is a small, fragrant mound that will be easily disposed of. The small clay bowl of spoiled olives releases its faint, sour scent into the air, but it is a minor note, barely noticeable beneath the dominant green freshness of the sound fruit. You rise from the stool feeling the slight stiffness in your back from bending forward, and you stretch your arms upward in a slow, easy motion that loosens the muscles of your shoulders. The morning light has grown a little stronger through the open shutters, the slant of its angles shifting gradually across the floor as the sun rises higher above the eastern hill. It will soon reach the workbench, warming the stone and making the water in the basin less cool than it is now. The time for washing has come. You lift the large earthenware jug from its place on the floor beside the workbench, cradling it against your body with both arms, and you carry it outside into the piazza. The fountain continues its soft, silvery murmur, the stream of water falling unbroken from the iron pipe into the stone basin below. You set the jug under the flow and let it fill, watching the water rise inside the clay vessel, its surface trembling with the impact of the falling stream. The sound of the filling is a deep, hollow note that gradually rises in pitch as the jug fills, until at last the water reaches the brim and you lift the jug away. Heavier now, the coolness of the liquid radiating through the clay and against your chest. Back inside the workshop, you pour the water carefully into the largest of the shallow stone basins, the one you will use for the first wash. The water splashes softly against the stone, and the sound is a clean, bright note in the quiet room. You fill the jug again and pour it in, and then a third time, until the basin is 2/3 full, and the water stands clear and cool, its surface reflecting the light from the windows like a small captured piece of the sky. You bring the basket of salted olives to the workbench and set it down beside the basin. Then you take a smaller basket, woven from willow withies bleached pale by water and sun, and you begin to lift handfuls of olives from the sorted heap and drop them into the water. The olives fall with soft, plunking sounds, each one breaking the surface tension and then sinking slowly to the bottom, where they rest in a dark, dense layer against the grey stone. The water closes over them with a glassy smoothness, and the olives, seen through the liquid, appear brighter, their colours intensified, the greens more vivid, the purples deeper, the blacks richer. You begin to wash them in small batches, working with both hands. The water is cool, not cold, and it flows around your wrists and between your fingers as you move the olives gently, rubbing them against one another with a soft circular motion that loosens any remaining dust or leaf fragments. The feel of the fruit under the water is different from the dry feel of the sorting. The skins are slippery now, slick with the water and the faint natural oil that the olives release as they are handled. The sound of the washing is a quiet, liquid rustling, a slosh and gurgle that is both rhythmic and calming, and you fall easily into the repeated motion of lifting, rubbing, and turning the olives over in the water. After each batch is washed, you lift the olives out a handful at a time, letting the water drain through your fingers, and you transfer them to a clean wicker basket lined with a fresh cloth. The wet olives gleam, droplets of water clinging to their surfaces and catching the light, and they make a soft pattering sound as they settle into the new basket, a sound like the first drops of a very gentle rain. The washed olives look different from the unwashed ones. Their colors are clearer, their bloom removed, their surfaces shining with a clean, wet gloss that makes them appear almost polished. You continue the washing, batch by batch, the rhythm of the work unbroken. Between batches you pause to change the water, lifting the heavy basin carefully and carrying it to the door, where you pour the dirty water out onto the cobbles of the piazza. The water spreads in a thin, silvery sheet, carrying with it the dust and small fragments of leaf that had been washed from the fruit, and then it trickles away between the stones and is gone, leaving only a dark, damp stain that will dry in the morning sun. You refill the basin with fresh water from the fountain, and the washing resumes. The same motions, the same sounds, the same quiet satisfaction of seeing the clean fruit accumulate in the basket. The pile of unwashed olives in the first basket slowly diminishes, while the basket of washed olives grows fuller and heavier. By the time the last handful has been lifted from the water and placed on the damp cloth, the morning is well advanced, and the light through the windows has shifted from the pale silvery tone of dawn to a warmer golden hue that speaks of the approaching middle of the day. The clean olives sit in their basket, damp and gleaming, ready for the mill, and the empty basin is drained and set aside to dry. You wipe your wet hands on a cloth that hangs from a hook on the workbench, feeling the coolness of the evaporating water on your skin, and you look around the workshop with a quiet sense of completion. One task is done, the first of many, and the rhythm of the day has been established. The air in the room is now touched with the fresh, clean scent of wet olives and the faint mineral smell of the fountain water, layered over the deeper, older perfume of oil and wood and earth. The great wooden press remains still, the mats remain stacked, the limestone weights remain against the wall, and everything seems to hold its breath in the long, patient pause before the next part of the work begins. The donkey stands in the small stable alcove at the back of the workshop, a patient, dusty grey creature with large dark eyes and ears that turn slowly towards you as you approach. You have known this animal for many years, and you know the particular way it rests its weight on 3 legs, while the 4th hoof tilts just slightly, the way its lower lip hangs loose and quivers when it dozes, the way it accepts the morning with a resignation that seems almost philosophical. The alcove is little more than a recess in the thick stone wall, its floor scattered with clean straw that rustles as the donkey shifts its weight and lets out a long, soft breath through its nostrils, a sigh that has no complaint in it. You lift the simple rope halter from its wooden peg and slip it over the donkey's head, and the animal follows you without resistance, its hooves making a slow, measured clip-clop on the packed earth as you lead it across the workshop towards the mill room. The mill room is a separate chamber, though it is really just an extension of the main space through a wide archway, its floor slightly lower and its roof higher to accommodate the great circular grinding stone in its wooden frame. The stone itself is a massive vertical mill wheel, nearly as tall as a man's chest, carved from a single block of grey granite that was brought up from the coastal quarries generations ago. Its edge is rough and pitted from years of grinding, and it stands on a broad, flat bed of the same hard stone, shaped into a shallow circular trough where the olives will be crushed. You lead the donkey to the wooden beam that extends from the millstone's central axle, a long, smooth pole of olive wood that has been polished by the animal's shoulder over countless circuits. The harness is a simple arrangement of padded leather straps and iron rings, and you fasten it with the same methodical care you apply to every task, first laying the padded collar across the donkey's neck, then adjusting the traces that connect to the beam, checking each buckle and each knot with a gentle pull before you are satisfied. The donkey stands completely still throughout, its tail giving an occasional lazy flick against its flanks, its eyes half closed as though it has already entered the trance of the work to come. You speak a quiet word, not a command, but an acknowledgement, and the donkey's ear rotates towards you and then back again. Before you set the wheel in motion, you bring the basket of washed olives from the main workshop and set it beside the trough, along with a wooden paddle used for pushing the fruit under the stone. The olives are still damp from their washing, their dark purple and green skins gleaming faintly in the light that enters through a high barred window in the mill room's east wall. The morning has moved on while you were preparing, and the sun is now high enough to throw a solid shaft of gold across the floor, illuminating the grey surface of the granite bed and making the dust motes dance in slow spirals. You take your position beside the trough, rest the paddle against its rim, and then give the donkey the signal to begin. A soft click of your tongue and a light touch on its flank. The donkey leans into the harness, the wooden beam creaks, and the great vertical stone begins its slow rotation around its central axle without any hurry or strain, as though it has been waiting all night for this moment and is content to move at the pace it has always moved. The granite surfaces, the vertical wheel and the horizontal bed meet with a low, grinding resonance that fills the mill room like a deep exhale from the earth itself. The first few circuits are empty, the stone simply turning on its bed to settle into its motion and to warm the contact between the two granite faces. You watch the stone pass in front of you at a walking pace, its pitted surface catching the light and revealing the small flecks of quartz embedded in the darker grey, tiny points of brightness that appear and disappear as the wheel revolves. The sound is a steady, rhythmic scrape, overlaid with the creak of the wooden axle turning in its lubricated socket, and the soft, regular pad of the donkey's hooves on the circular track. The animal has walked this path so many times that its hooves have worn a slight depression into the earth, a visible ring that marks the circuit as clearly as a drawn circle. When you are satisfied that the mill is running smoothly, you take the wooden scoop from the basket and gather a portion of wet olives, the fruit cool and firm against the wood. You tip them into the trough just ahead of the advancing millstone, and they tumble down the slight incline into the gap between the vertical and horizontal stones. The crushing sound changes instantly as the first olives are caught. There is a soft, wet crackling, a series of small percussive pops as the skins split and the flesh is compressed. The scent that rises is immediately more intense, a sharp, green, peppery aroma that seems to open the air itself, filling every corner of the mill room with a freshness that is both clean and slightly bitter. The stone continues its steady rotation, and you watch the olives disappear under the granite as it passes over them, ground into a paste that spreads across the bed. The donkey maintains its pace without any urging, its head nodding slightly with each step, and you allow the circuit to complete before you add the next scoop of fruit. The rhythm establishes itself naturally. The slow turn of the wheel, the gentle step of the donkey, the pause while you scoop, the soft rush of olives entering the trough, the wet crackle of crushing, the pause again. It is a rhythm that leaves plenty of room for thought without demanding it. A cadence that feels as old and as inevitable as the tides. After the first few rounds, the paste begins to accumulate on the granite bed, pushed outward by the pressure of the wheel into a thick, lumpy ring that follows the path of the stone. You take the wooden paddle and periodically scrape the paste back towards the center so that it will be ground again, ensuring that every piece of fruit is crushed completely. The paddle makes a different sound, a soft, slick scrape against the stone, and it leaves behind a thin film of oily residue that catches the light in 1,000 tiny rainbows before the stone passes over it again and erases them. The paste at this stage is a chunky, heterogeneous mass, a mixture of crushed skins and torn flesh and broken pits, and the first liberated oil, its color a marbled blend of deep purple and pale green and the creamy white of the crushed stones. The wheel turns, the donkey walks, you scrape and add more olives and the morning deepens around you. The shaft of sunlight from the high window has moved noticeably, its leading edge now crossing the center of the granite bed and illuminating the paste with a clarity that reveals every texture, every fleck of skin, every tiny bead of oil that has begun to separate and glisten. The light has warmed as well, and you can feel its heat on your forearms when you reach across the trough, a gentle, pleasant sensation that contrasts with the coolness of the stone. As the grinding continues, the paste becomes smoother and more uniform. The repeated passage of the great wheel breaks down the larger pieces of skin and flesh, reduces the pit fragments to smaller and smaller sizes, and works the mass into a consistent, velvety texture that spreads evenly on the bed. The color gradually shifts from the marbled mix of early crushing to a single rich tone that can best be described as the color of sunlit moss, a deep olive green with golden undertones, glossy and thick. The scent is mellowed too, from the sharp, peppery burst of the first crush to a deeper, rounder aroma that carries notes of freshly cut grass and artichoke and the faint, pleasant bitterness of raw olive. You become aware of the small adjustments you make without thinking, the slight tilt of the paddle that guides the paste more effectively, the gentle words you speak to the donkey when it slows almost imperceptibly, the way you steady the basket with your free hand to keep it from sliding on the stone floor. These actions are so deeply learned that they require no conscious thought. Your hands and your eyes and your ears work together in a quiet partnership that has been forged over many seasons, and your mind is left free to drift in the gentle space between the sounds of the mill. The donkey's hooves continue their soft, steady padding on the earthen track, a sound that is so constant it becomes a form of silence in itself. The animal's breathing is even and deep, its flanks rising and falling in time with its steps, and occasionally it lets out another of those long, philosophical sighs that seems to express a profound contentment with the simplicity of the task. The wooden beam that connects the donkey to the millstone axle creaks in a regular pattern, a sound that you have come to associate with the high point of each circuit. When the beam passes closest to the wall and the slight flex of the wood under load produces a small, musical protest, you work through the basket of olives with a steady, unhurried pace, and by the time the basket is empty, the granite bed is covered in a thick layer of smooth olive paste that gleams in the sunlight. Some of the paste has been pushed by the stone into the shallow collecting channel that runs around the outer edge of the bed, and you use a smaller, curved wooden spatula to scrape it from the channel and deposit it into the large ceramic basin that you have placed on the floor beside the trough. The paste falls from the spatula in heavy, slow-motion dollops, each one landing with a soft, dense sound, and the basin gradually fills with the fragrant, moss-colored mass that will soon be spread onto the fibre mats. The donkey, sensing that the grinding phase is complete, slows its pace and then stops altogether, standing with its head lowered and its harness slack. You go to the animal and unbuckle the traces, lifting the padded collar from its neck and hanging the harness on its wooden peg. You lead the donkey back to its alcove, where a fresh pile of straw has been laid and a bucket of water stands ready. The animal drinks in long, slow draughts, the water making a gentle glugging sound in the bucket, and then it settles onto the straw with another sigh, its legs folding underneath it in a motion that is both awkward and graceful. You rest your hand on the animal's warm, dusty neck for a moment, feeling the slow pulse of blood beneath the skin, and then you leave it to its rest. Back in the mill room, you take a cloth and wipe the wooden paddle and the curved spatula, removing the last of the paste before it can dry and harden. You wipe down the edge of the granite bed as well, and you pour a small amount of water from the jug onto the stone, watching it flow across the surface and carry with it the fine residue of the grinding. The water pools in the collecting channel, and you scoop it out with the cloth, wringing it into the bucket, and then the stone is clean and cool and ready for the next use, its grey surface dark with moisture that will soon evaporate in the warmth. The light in the mill room has shifted again while you were cleaning, the shaft of sun now angled steeply, and its colour deepening from bright gold to a softer, warmer amber. The morning has passed without your noticing, the hours dissolved in the rhythm of the turning stone and the patient steps of the donkey. You lift the heavy ceramic basin containing the olive paste, feeling its weight pull against your arms and shoulders, and you carry it carefully across the mill room and through the archway back into the main workshop, where the stack of fibre mats and the great wooden press wait in their own patient stillness. The paste in the basin is smooth and cool and redolent of the long morning's work, and you set it down on the pressing bench, ready for the next stage of the day's gentle, unhurried labour. The basin of olive paste sits on the pressing bench, a heavy ceramic vessel with a wide mouth and two small loop handles at its sides, its interior slick with the moss-green mass that holds the warmth of the grinding stone still within it. You lift the basin slightly to test its weight, feeling the dense, living heft of the paste, and then you set it down again on the wooden surface of the bench, which is scarred and stained from many years of this same work. The bench is positioned directly beside the great wooden press, so that the stack of fibre mats, the fiscally, is within easy reach, and the whole arrangement speaks of a logic that has been refined over generations, each tool placed exactly where the hand expects to find it. You take a moment now to prepare the pressing plate, which is a thick disc of olive wood, slightly larger than the fiscally, that sits on the base of the press directly under the suspended beam. The plate is dark with age, its surface polished to a dull gleam by the weight and movement of countless pressings, and it has a very slight concavity at its center, worn down over the years by the steady downward pressure of the beam. You wipe the plate with a dry cloth, removing any dust that may have settled since the last use, and you check that it is seated evenly on the press base, its weight solid and unshifting. Then you pour a thin film of warm water over the plate from the small jug you keep for this purpose, just enough to moisten the surface without making it wet. The water will help the first mat to grip slightly and prevent it from sliding as the stack builds. The stack of fiscally waits on the low bench to your left. You reach for the first mat, lifting it from the top of the stack, and the sensation of its fibers against your fingers is rough and dry, like a very stiff, coarse cloth. It is a disc, perhaps 2 handspans wide, woven in concentric rings from strong hemp threads that have been twisted and then flattened, and its edges are slightly uneven where the weave has loosened over time. The color is a deep amber, almost the color of strong tea, and it carries the sharp, fermented scent of old oil that has been pressed into its fibers and then allowed to dry. The mat is lighter than it looks, its open weave making it airy and porous, and you hold it for a moment, turning it in your hands to check that no part of it is torn or weak. Satisfied, you lay it flat and centered on the pressing plate, smoothing it down with the flat of both hands so that it sits perfectly even. With the first mat in place, you turn now to the basin of paste and to the wooden scoop that rests inside it. A simple, flat-bladed tool with a short handle, carved from a single piece of olive wood and worn to a silky smoothness by long use. You dip the scoop into the paste, feeling the slight resistance as the blade pushes through the dense velvety mass, and you lift a generous portion, the paste clinging to the wood in a heavy, rounded dollop that gleams under the light from the high windows. You bring the scoop over to the waiting mat, and with a slow, controlled motion of the wrist, you deposit the paste onto the center of the disc, where it settles with a soft, thick sound, a sound that is almost a sigh. Now you take up the spreading tool, a flat wooden spatula with a broad, rounded blade that fits comfortably in the palm of your hand. With this, you begin to spread the paste outward from the center, using a gentle circular motion that pushes the mass evenly towards the edges of the mat. The paste moves under the spatula with a smooth, fluid resistance, parting and flowing and then settling again, its surface developing a soft, wave-like texture that catches the light in subtle ridges and hollows. You work slowly, your wrist turning in a steady rhythm, and you watch the layer of paste grow thinner and more uniform as it spreads, the deep olive green color becoming slightly paler as it is stretched across the fibers. The scent of the crushed fruit intensifies as the paste is disturbed, releasing fresh notes of grass and pepper and the faint, clean bitterness of raw olive. The spreading continues until the paste reaches almost to the very edge of the mat, leaving only a narrow margin of bare fiber, no wider than your thumb, all the way around. You smooth the surface with a final, light pass of the spatula, eliminating any thick spots or uneven patches, and then you pause to examine your work. The layer is even and consistent, a perfect disc of olive paste that mirrors the circular shape of the mat beneath it, its surface glistening faintly and its edges clean. The first layer of the stack is complete. You return the spatula to the basin and reach for the second fiscalo, lifting it from the stack with the same careful attention you gave the first. You lay it on top of the paste-covered mat, centering it carefully, and then you press it down gently with both hands, feeling the slight give of the paste beneath it, and seeing the way the pressure causes the paste to spread just a little further into the margin of bare fiber. The mat settles onto the paste with a soft, wet sound, and its fibers immediately begin to darken as they absorb the first traces of oil and vegetable water from the layer below. The process repeats, and you fall into its rhythm with the ease of long practice. You scoop a new portion of paste from the basin, deposit it onto the center of the new mat, and spread it outward with the same circular, unhurried motion, building a second layer that is identical to the first in its thickness and its evenness. Then another mat is placed on top, pressed down and centered, and another layer of paste is spread. The stack begins to grow taller, rising from the press plate in a neat column of alternating dark and amber bands, the fiber mats and the paste layers interleaved like the pages of a thick, oily book. The movements are repetitive, and yet they do not feel monotonous. Each scoop of paste has a slightly different weight, a slightly different consistency. Each mat has a slightly different texture under your hands, a different pattern of wear in its weave. Each spreading motion traces a slightly different path across the surface, responding to the subtle variations in the paste's thickness. These small differences are enough to hold your attention without demanding it, enough to keep your hands engaged while your mind drifts into a calm, observant state that is halfway between waking and dreaming. The light through the windows continues its slow, imperceptible shift across the workshop, the bright shaft that once fell on the grinding stone now moving to touch the edge of the pressing bench, illuminating the growing stack with a warm golden glow that makes the paste layers gleam like wet paint. The air in the room is thick with the scent of the paste, a rich green perfume that seems to coat the inside of your nose and settle on your tongue, and you breathe it in deeply, letting it become a part of your awareness of the moment. Outside, the fountain continues its soft, liquid murmur, and from somewhere in the distance comes the faint, irregular clunk of a goat bell, a sound so familiar that you hardly register it except as another layer in the quiet tapestry of the afternoon. You work your way steadily through the stack of fiscally and the basin of paste, the column of layers growing higher with each repetition. When the stack reaches a height that feels right, a height you know from experience rather than from measurement, you pause and step back slightly to assess it. The column stands perhaps 2 handspans tall, a neat, straight-sided cylinder of compressed mats and paste layers, its sides showing the thin lines of oozing paste where the pressure of the stacking has begun to push the fruit matter outward between the mats. These small extrusions are a sign that the stack is dense and well constructed, and you note them with a quiet satisfaction before reaching for the final empty mat that will cap the top of the pile. The last mat goes on with the same care as the first, centered and pressed down, and then you take a clean wooden disc, slightly smaller than the mats, and place it on top of the final mat to provide a flat, even surface for the press beam to bear against. This disc is the same dark olive wood as the pressing plate below, and it too is polished and stained by long use, its surface carrying the faint, ghostly imprint of the press beam's end grain. You center it carefully and then stand back, your hands falling to your sides, your breathing slow and deep. The stack is complete. It sits on the press plate, a neat column of 40 layers, each one a sandwich of coarse hemp fibre and smooth olive paste, each one ready to yield its oil under the slow, patient pressure of the limestone weights. The surface of the wooden-capped disc gleams dully in the golden afternoon light, and the faint, wet lines of oozing paste that trace the edges of the stack catch the light in tiny glints of green and gold. The work of the spreading has taken the better part of an hour, and yet it feels to you as though no time at all has passed, the rhythm of the scooping and spreading having dissolved the minutes into a single unbroken flow of calm, attentive motion. You wipe the spatula and the scoop with a damp cloth, removing the last of the paste from their surfaces, and you set them aside on the bench to dry. You wipe your hands as well, the cloth coming away, stained with the moss-green residue of the fruit, and you flex your fingers slowly, feeling the pleasant, mild ache of muscles that have been used in a steady, sustained way. Then you lift the nearly empty basin and carry it back to the mill room, where you scrape the last small remnants of paste into the collecting channel to be washed away later, and you set the basin upside down to drain. When you return to the main workshop, the stack of mats and paste sits waiting under the suspended press beam, its layers compressing slightly under their own weight, a few more tiny beads of oil beginning to appear at the edges and tremble there, catching the light. The next phase of the work will be the loading of the stones, a task slower and more patient even than the spreading, and you feel a quiet readiness for its settling into your body, a sense that the day is unfolding exactly as it should, each step following the last in a gentle, unbroken chain that leads towards the first slow seeping of the oil. The stack of fibre mats and olive paste stands completed on the pressing plate, a neat column of alternating dark and amber layers that rises from the base of the great wooden press and waits in the golden afternoon light for the slow, patient pressure that will release its oil. You stand beside it for a moment, your hands resting lightly on the edge of the pressing bench, and you let your gaze travel across the workshop to the far wall, where the limestone weights are arranged in their careful row against the plaster. They have waited all morning, silent and grey and dense, and now the time has come to lift them one by one and carry them to the press. You walk across the packed earth floor, your sandals making their soft, familiar sound, and you stop before the row of stones. They are of varying sizes, as you know well, and you will begin with the smaller ones, the ones you can manage with a single steady lift, before working your way up to the heavier blocks that require both arms and a careful, balanced stance. The first stone sits at the near end of the row, a rectangular block of pale grey limestone about the size of a large loaf of bread, its edges rounded by handling, its surface mottled with the faint, fossil-like traces of ancient shells that were embedded in the rock when it was formed. You bend your knees slightly, reach down with both hands, and take hold of the stone by its sides, your fingers finding the natural depressions and ridges that offer the best grip. The stone is cool against your palms, cool with the deep underground coolness that limestone seems to carry within it, no matter how warm the day becomes. And its surface has a fine, gritty texture, like very coarse paper, that feels clean and dry. You lift it smoothly, letting the weight come up through your arms and settle into your shoulders and back, and you straighten your knees, the stone now cradled against your chest with your elbows tucked in. The weight is substantial but not straining, a solid, dependable heft that feels almost companionable, and you carry it across the workshop with slow, measured steps, your eyes on the press beam ahead. The wooden cradle that sits on top of the press beam is a shallow, rectangular frame, its sides raised just enough to keep the stones from shifting once they are placed. You reach the press, pause to steady your stance, and then lift the stone a little higher, guiding it over the edge of the cradle and lowering it gently into the wooden frame. The stone settles with a low, solid thud, a sound that is more felt than heard, a vibration that travels through the beam and into the stack of mats below. The press gives a single soft creak as the weight is received, and then it falls silent again, as if acknowledging the new burden and then returning to its patient waiting. You step back, your hands now dusted with a fine, pale powder from the limestone, and you look at the single stone resting in the cradle. It sits squarely, its weight distributed evenly across the beam, and already you can see the faintest compression in the stack of mats, a slight closing of the thin gaps between the layers where the paste had oozed outward. The change is almost imperceptible, but you know it is the beginning of a transformation that will continue through the afternoon. The slow, silent collapse of the paste layers under the accumulating pressure that will eventually force the oil to seep from the fibres. You return to the row of stones and select the next one, a block slightly larger than the first, its shape more irregular, with one face that curves gently outward like a shallow bowl. You lift it with the same careful technique, feeling the different balance of this stone. The weight wants to tilt slightly to one side so that you must compensate with a subtle adjustment of your grip. The limestone dust transfers to your shirt now, leaving pale, ghostly handprints on the dark fabric, and the cool weight presses against your chest as you make the slow walk back to the press. This stone goes into the cradle beside the first, its curved face nestling against the straight edge of its neighbor, and the two blocks together make a solid, stable mass that begins to look like the foundation of something ancient and permanent. The press creaks again, a longer sound this time, a low wooden groan that seems to come from deep within the fibers of the great beam, and you pause with your hands still resting on the second stone, listening to the sound as it fades into the quiet of the workshop. It is not a sound of strain or complaint, but rather the voice of the press speaking in its own language. A language of slow compression and patient resistance that you have learned to understand over the years. You pat the stone once, a small habitual gesture, and then you turn back to the row against the wall. The third stone is different from the first two, a long, narrow block that is almost like a small pillar, and you lift it differently, cradling it lengthwise against your forearm and bracing it against your hip as you walk. The weight pulls at your shoulder in a new way, and you shift your grip slightly until the balance feels right. This stone you place across the top of the first two, bridging the gap between them and creating a second layer, the beginning of a small, careful pyramid of weight that will grow steadily higher as you continue the loading. The stone settles, and the press responds with a soft, settling sigh, the beam lowering by a fraction of a finger's width as the stack of mats compresses just a little more. You pause between stones now, not because you need to rest, but because the work invites pausing. The loading of the weights is not a task to be rushed. It is a slow, contemplative process in which each stone must be chosen, lifted, carried, and placed with a deliberate attention that leaves no room for hurry. You stand beside the press, your hands resting on the rough wood of the beam, and you watch the stack of mats, observing the way the paste has begun to glisten more brightly at the edges, the oil starting to gather in tiny, trembling beads that catch the light. The pressure is still light, still in its earliest stages, but already the mats are beginning their slow, silent work of releasing what they hold. The fourth stone calls you back to the row against the wall, and you go to it with the same measured pace, the same careful attention. This one is a square block, compact and dense, heavier than its size would suggest, and you must brace your feet apart and lift with your legs rather than your back, feeling the weight travel up through your body in a smooth, controlled motion. The limestone is cold against your palms, cold and dry and faintly dusty, and as you carry it across the workshop, you notice the small details of its surface, a dark vein of some harder mineral that runs diagonally across one face, a small chip at one corner where the stone was struck long ago, a patch of pale lichen that has grown on the side that faced the wall. These details are like the faces of old friends, familiar and reassuring, and you note them without thinking as you place the fourth stone into the cradle, fitting it beside the third, so that the second layer is now complete. The press accepts the new weight with another soft creak, and now the beam is visibly lower than it was when you began, the gap between the beam and the top of the stack reduced by perhaps the width of your finger. The stack itself has changed in appearance. The layers of paste have been compressed so that they are thinner and denser, the mats are pressed more tightly together, and the beads of oil at the edges have grown larger, some of them now heavy enough to begin a slow downward slide along the sides of the stack. No oil has yet reached the collection basin, but the promise of it is there, written in the glistening surface of the compressed stack. You return to the row for the fifth stone, and then the sixth, each one selected not quite at random, but with an intuitive sense of which shape and weight will fit best into the growing arrangement on the cradle. The stones are like pieces of a puzzle that has no single solution, and you build the pile with a quiet, spatial intelligence that has been honed over many pressings. Some stones are placed flat, some on edge, some overlapping the gaps between the stones below so that the weight is distributed evenly and the pile remains stable. The wooden cradle creaks slightly under the accumulating load, its joints flexing, but the joinery is strong and the wood is seasoned, and you know it will hold. The seventh stone is one of the heavier ones, a broad, flat slab that you must carry with both arms extended in front of you, your hands gripping its edges and your back held straight. The weight pulls at your shoulders and makes your breath come a little deeper, but you walk steadily, your pace unchanged, and you lower the slab onto the top of the growing pile with a controlled, gentle motion that belies its mass. The press responds with a deeper groan, a sound that seems to travel through the floor and up into your feet, and the stack of mats compresses visibly now, the layers closing together so that the individual mats are harder to distinguish, their amber edges merging into a single dark band at the center of the stack. You straighten up and roll your shoulders slightly, feeling the pleasant warmth of the work in your muscles, and you look around the workshop. The light has continued its slow golden shift, the beam of sun now falling directly on the pressing bench and illuminating the stack with a rich, honeyed glow that makes the paste gleam like dark emerald. The air is still, heavy with the scent of the olives, and the only sounds are the soft murmur of the fountain outside and the occasional settling creak of the press as it adjusts to the weight it carries. In the alcove, the donkey shifts in its straw, lets out a long, slow breath, and is still again. You continue the loading, moving back and forth between the row of stones and the press, with the steady, rhythmic patience of a pendulum. The eighth stone joins the pile, then the ninth and the 10th, each one adding its weight to the accumulating pressure, each one received by the press with a soft, wooden sound that is part sigh and part song. The beam has descended by a full handspan now, and the stack of mats has been compressed to perhaps half of its original height, the paste layers reduced to thin, dark seams between the darkening mats. Oil has begun to gather in earnest at the edges of the stack, not just beads now, but small glistening pools that tremble and occasionally release a single, slow droplet that falls into the collection basin below, with a sound so soft it is almost imperceptible. The row of stones against the wall is nearly empty now, only the largest blocks remaining, the ones you save for last because they require the most care. These are the foundation stones, the heaviest of the collection, blocks of dense grey limestone that have been in the workshop since it was built and will be here long after you are gone. You approach them with a deep, steadying breath and a slight adjustment of your stance, your feet planted wide and your knees bent in readiness. The first of these great stones is roughly the size of a small barrel, its surface dark with age and smooth where it has been handled, and you must wrap your arms around it and lift by hugging it close. The weight is enormous, a deep, crushing heft that presses the air from your lungs, and you lift it slowly, carefully, with the full strength of your legs and back, rising inch by inch until the stone is cradled against your chest and your balance is steady. Then you walk, one slow step at a time, feeling the packed earth under your sandals and the cool mass of the stone against your body and the steady, deep rhythm of your own breathing. The press waits, silent and ready, and when you lower this great stone into the cradle and release it, the sound it makes is deeper than any before, a low, resonant thud that seems to echo in the wooden beams of the ceiling and then fade away. The press groans, a long, slow sound that rises and falls and then settles into silence, and the stack compresses by another visible increment, the oil now beginning to seep from the edges in thin, glistening streaks that trace slow paths down the sides of the mats and into the collection basin. The basin, which was empty when you began the loading, now holds a thin layer of dark, golden-green liquid that reflects the light and trembles with each new droplet that falls into it. You stand very still, your breath slowing back to its resting pace, and you watch the oil gather, the first yield of the long day's work. The final stones go onto the pile one by one, each one a monumental effort that you perform with the same quiet, unhurried care you have brought to every task since the morning's first light. When the last stone has been placed and the cradle is full, a neat, balanced stack of grey limestone blocks that rises above the beam like a small cairn, you step back and let your arms fall to your sides. Your hands are white with limestone dust, your shirt is marked with pale handprints, and your body carries a pleasant, deep tiredness that feels earned and clean. The press stands under its load, silent now, the beam lowered, the stack compressed, the oil beginning its slow, patient seep into the basin below. You take a cloth from the bench and wipe your hands, the limestone dust coming away in pale streaks on the fabric, and you look once more at the cradle full of stones, their grey faces catching the golden light, their weight pressing down through the beam and into the mats and into the paste that holds, within its crushed and compacted fibres, the oil that will fill the clay jars and sustain the lamps in the kitchen and the quiet life of the town through the year to come. The loading is complete, and now there is nothing to do but wait and watch, and listen to the soft, steady dripping of the oil as it begins to flow. The stones are in place now, a neat cairn of grey limestone blocks resting in the wooden cradle atop the press beam, their combined weight pressing down through the dark, oil-saturated wood and into the compressed stack of fibre mats and olive paste, with a steady, silent, unrelenting patience that has no need of haste or urgency. You stand beside the press, your hands still pale with the fine dust of the limestone, your breathing slow and deep after the exertion of carrying and lifting the heaviest blocks, and you let the stillness of the workshop settle around you like a familiar, comfortable garment. The loading is finished, the pressure is applied, and now there is nothing to do but wait, nothing to do but watch the slow, inevitable beginning of the oil's emergence, a process that cannot be hurried and will not be delayed. The collection basin sits on the base of the press directly beneath the stack of mats, a broad, shallow vessel carved from a single block of the same grey limestone that forms the weights above. Its interior is smooth and slightly concave, worn to a gentle polish by the passage of countless droplets over countless seasons, and at this moment it is empty except for a few scattered drops of water left over from the moistening of the pressing plate. The light from the high windows falls across the basin in a golden slant that illuminates its pale grey surface and reveals every tiny irregularity in the stone, every faint scratch, and every subtle variation in colour. You pull the low wooden stool closer to the press and sit down, your weight settling onto the polished seat, your hands coming to rest on your knees, and you prepare to watch and to wait. The first sign of the oil is not a drop, but a glistening, a subtle change in the appearance of the stack's outer edges, where the paste layers are compressed between the darkening fibre mats. The moisture that had already begun to gather during the loading now intensifies, the tiny beads of liquid swelling and merging into larger, trembling droplets that catch the light and hold it, each one a tiny convex mirror that reflects the window and the beams of the ceiling, and your own, still, watching figure in miniature. The droplets cling to the rough fibres of the mats, held by the surface tension of the liquid, and they seem to hesitate there, as if uncertain whether to fall, gathering themselves for the slow, inevitable descent that will begin the long afternoon's work of collection. Then the first drop falls. It releases from the edge of the lowest mat with a soft, liquid sound, a single, clean note that breaks the silence of the workshop and then fades, and it falls through the still air in a perfect, glistening sphere, golden green and translucent, until it strikes the surface of the stone basin with a sound that is less a splash than a gentle tap, a small, round, musical note that seems to hang in the air for a moment before it is absorbed into the stillness. The drop spreads on the bare stone, a tiny, glistening disk of liquid, and then it settles, a single dark spot on the pale grey surface, the first yield of the pressing. You watch it without moving, your eyes fixed on the point where it landed, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of a beginning. A second drop follows, not immediately but after a pause that is long enough for the silence to re-establish itself, and then a third, and then the rhythm begins to establish itself in earnest. The dripping is slow, far slower than a heartbeat, each drop separated from the next by a space of several seconds during which the liquid gathers at the edge of the mat, swells into a trembling pendant sphere, elongates, and then lets go with that same soft musical tap. The sound is steady, like a quiet metronome, a natural timekeeper that marks the passage of the afternoon with a patience that makes the minutes feel both longer and more peaceful than they actually are. You listen to the dripping and let your breathing fall into a rhythm that is independent of it, slower even than the droplets, your chest rising and falling in a deep, calm cycle that matches the stillness of the room. The light through the windows continues its slow golden shift, the shaft of sun that had been falling on the pressing bench now moving inch by inch across the floor and approaching the collection basin, where it will soon illuminate the accumulating pool with a clarity that reveals every color and every texture within the liquid. As the drops continue to fall, the small dark spots on the stone begin to merge, the individual droplets losing their separateness and flowing together into a thin, continuous film that spreads across the concave surface and seeks the lowest point of the basin. The film thickens gradually, almost imperceptibly, each new drop adding its tiny volume to the whole, and soon the basin holds a shallow pool, no deeper than the thickness of your finger, a pool that trembles with each new impact and then settles back into a glassy smoothness. The color of the pool is not a single uniform shade, but a complex blend of hues that shift and deepen as the light moves across them. At the center, where the liquid is thinnest, it appears as a pale greenish gold, the color of young olive leaves held up to the sun. At the edges, where the depth is slightly greater, it darkens to a rich amber tone, almost like honey, and in the very deepest part, where the droplets have been falling longest, there is a core of deep, translucent emerald green that seems to glow from within. The surface of the pool catches the reflection of the high window, a bright golden rectangle that shimmers and distorts with each new drop, and around that reflection the colors shift and swirl in slow liquid patterns that are hypnotic to watch. The sound of the dripping changes as the pool deepens. When the basin was bare stone, each drop landed with a crisp, percussive tap, a sound that was bright and distinct. Now, as the liquid level rises and the falling drops strike not stone, but the surface of the pool, the sound becomes softer and deeper, a liquid, resonant note that is less a tap than a gentle musical plunk, a sound that seems to come from somewhere further away and is muted by the very liquid that produces it. The plunk is followed by a brief, shimmering ripple that spreads outward from the point of impact and then fades, leaving the surface smooth again, and then another drop falls, and the cycle repeats, over and over, a gentle, ongoing conversation between the oil and the stone. You sit on the low stool, your body still and relaxed, your eyes moving slowly between the stack of mats and the collection basin and the shaft of sunlight that now touches the edge of the pool and makes the liquid glow with an internal fire. The air in the workshop is heavy with the scent of the olive paste, a rich, green, slightly peppery aroma that has been joined now by a new note, the clean, nutty fragrance of the fresh oil as it is released. This scent is different from the scent of the paste, lighter and more delicate, and it floats above the heavier perfume of the workshop, like a clear, bright melody above a low, sustained chord. You breathe it in deeply, letting it fill your senses, and you feel a deep, wordless contentment settle into your body As the pull continues to deepen, you begin to notice the separation that is taking place within the liquid. The droplets that fall from the mats are not pure oil but a mixture of oil and the watery vegetation juice that was trapped within the cells of the olive flesh. And these two liquids, now released, begin to separate according to their different densities. The oil, lighter than water, rises to the surface, forming a distinct golden layer that floats above the darker, cloudier vegetation juice beneath. The boundary between the two layers is not sharp but gradual, a soft, hazy transition where the liquids mingle before they part, and it shifts and quivers with each new drop that falls into the basin. You watch this separation with a quiet fascination, observing the way the oil layer thickens and clarifies as it rises, the way the watery layer settles and darkens below, the way the interface between them becomes a delicate, shimmering membrane that reflects the light in rainbows. The time has come for the first skimming. You rise from the stool, your legs slightly stiff from sitting still, and you cross to the workbench where a flat, shallow clay bowl and a wooden spoon with a wide, flat blade are waiting. The spoon is carved from a single piece of olive wood, its bowl worn thin by long use, its handle smooth and dark with the oil that has soaked into its fibers over the years. You carry the spoon and the clay bowl back to the press and kneel down beside the collection basin, the packed earth cool against your knees, and you lean forward until your face is close to the surface of the pool, close enough to see your own faint reflection looking back at you from the golden liquid. The skimming is a delicate, patient task, one that requires a steady hand and a slow, controlled motion. You lower the spoon until its flat blade hovers just above the surface of the oil, and then you tilt it slightly so that the leading edge dips into the liquid with the gentlest possible entry, barely disturbing the surface tension. The oil flows over the edge of the spoon in a thin golden sheet, coating the wood with a glistening film, and you lift the spoon carefully, carrying its shallow load of oil across the few inches of air to the clay bowl, where you tip the spoon and let the oil slide off into the vessel. The oil moves slowly, thickly, its viscosity greater than that of water, and it settles into the bowl with a soft, heavy sound, a sound that is almost a sigh. You repeat the motion again and again, each skim removing a thin layer of the golden oil from the surface of the pool and transferring it to the clay bowl, leaving behind the darker, cloudier water that will be drained off later and discarded. The work is slow and methodical, your wrists moving in a steady, practiced rhythm, the spoon dipping and lifting and tipping with the same quiet precision that you have brought to every task of the day. The oil accumulates in the clay bowl, its level rising gradually, and as it does, its color deepens from a pale, translucent gold to a richer, more opaque amber that glows in the afternoon light. Between skims, you pause to let the oil layer replenish itself, the fresh droplets from the stack of mats continuing their steady metronomic fall, each one adding its small contribution to the pool, each one slowly separating into its oil and water components so that the golden layer thickens once more and becomes ready for the next skim. These pauses are filled with the same quiet stillness that has accompanied the entire afternoon. The soft dripping, the distant murmur of the fountain, the occasional creak of the press beam settling under its load, and, very faintly, from somewhere far below the hill and far out across the water, a sound that might be the distant breath of a ship's horn, so faint and so far away that you cannot be certain you heard it at all. The sound comes once and then is gone, swallowed by the distance and the stillness, and you return your attention to the basin and the oil, letting the distant, unknown ships carry on with their distant, unknown business, while you carry on with yours. The skimming continues through the long, slow middle of the afternoon, the clay bowl filling steadily with the first pressings yield, and you pause occasionally to pour the collected oil into one of the waiting storage jars, a tall, dark vessel with a wide mouth and a wax-sealed cork that you remove carefully and set aside. The oil pours from the clay bowl into the jar in a slow, golden stream, thick and glossy, catching the light in coils and ribbons that fold over one another and settle into the darkness of the jar's interior. The sound of the pouring is a soft, liquid gurgle, a sound that speaks of abundance and patience, and when the jar is filled to the appropriate level, you wipe its rim with a clean cloth, replace the cork with a firm press, and set the jar back in its place along the cool, shadowed wall. The light through the windows has shifted again, its angle now steeper, its color deepening from the bright gold of midday to the softer, warmer amber of late afternoon. The shaft of sun has moved past the collection basin and now falls on the far wall, illuminating the rough plaster and the dark, oil-stained jars with a rich, honeyed glow that makes the whole workshop feel like a room preserved in the heart of a golden gemstone. The dripping from the stack of mats has slowed noticeably, the intervals between drops growing longer as the paste yields the last of its first pressing oil, and the pool in the basin, no longer fed by a steady succession of droplets, has stabilized at a constant level, its surface smooth and reflective, the oil layer now thin and slow to renew. You perform the final skim of the first pressing, your spoon moving across the surface with the same gentle, practiced care as the first, gathering the last thin film of golden oil and transferring it to the jar. Then you sit back on your heels, the spoon resting in the now nearly empty clay bowl, and you look at the stack of mats, compressed and dark and still, their work for this pressing complete. The basin below holds only the watery vegetation juice now, a cloudy greenish liquid that carries a faint bitter scent and will be poured away later onto the herb beds outside the workshop door. The good oil, the pure golden oil, is safe in its jars, sealed and stored in the cool darkness against the wall, and the first pressing is done. The first pressing is complete. The golden oil sealed away in its clay jars, and the workshop settles into a deep, heavy stillness that seems to radiate from the ancient wooden press and fill every corner of the room. You rise slowly from your kneeling position beside the collection basin, your knees making a soft, popping sound as you straighten your legs, and you stretch your arms upward in a long, slow motion that pulls at the muscles of your shoulders and back. The afternoon has grown warm, the heat of the day now at its fullest, and the air inside the workshop, though still cooler than the air outside, has lost the crisp freshness of the morning and taken on a drowsy, languid quality that invites rest. You walk to the open shutters and look out into the piazza, where the midday sun falls straight down onto the pale cobblestones and makes them shimmer with a faint silvery heat. The fountain continues its soft liquid murmur, the stream of water falling from the iron pipe and splashing into the stone basin with a sound that seems louder now than it did in the morning, perhaps because the world around it has grown so quiet. The cat you saw earlier, the lean grey one, has found a patch of shade beneath the low wall and lies stretched out on the cool stones, its flanks rising and falling with the slow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. Nothing else moves in the piazza. No one walks the lane, no doors open or close, and the town seems to hold its breath in the great, silent pause of the Sicilian noon. You step through the doorway of the workshop and out into the open air, and the heat wraps around you like a heavy, soft blanket, pressing against your skin and making the linen of your shirt feel warm and dry. The light is brilliant, almost white at its center, and you squint slightly as your eyes adjust to the brightness after the dim, shadowed interior of the press room. The terrace in front of the workshop is a small paved area, bounded by a low stone wall, and against the whitewashed facade of the building, a wooden bench sits in the shade of an old fig tree, whose broad-lobed leaves cast a dappled, shifting shadow that moves gently in the faintest stirring of the warm air. You walk to the bench and sit down, feeling the wood warm against your back and the backs of your legs, and you let out a long, slow breath that you did not realize you had been holding. The bench is a simple thing, a plank of chestnut wood supported by 2 stone blocks, but it has been placed with care in the spot where the shade lingers longest, and the view opens out over the tiled rooftops and the terraced hillsides and, far below, the wide, calm expanse of the Tyrrhenian Sea. You lean back against the whitewashed wall, the plaster warm and slightly rough through the thin fabric of your shirt, and you let your gaze travel outward and downward, following the lines of the town as they descend towards the water. The view from the terrace is one that you have seen countless times, and yet it never presents itself in exactly the same way. Today the sea is a broad, flat sheet of blue-grey silk, its surface so calm that the horizon line is a single, unbroken stroke where the water meets the paler blue of the sky. A heat haze hangs over the water, a thin, shimmering veil that softens the line of the horizon and makes the distant fishing boats appear to float slightly above the surface, their hulls suspended in the shimmer. The boats are small, dark shapes that move with an almost imperceptible slowness, their latent sails hanging limp in the windless air, and you watch them without focusing on them, your gaze resting on the wide, tranquil scene with the same calm, unfixed attention you would give to a familiar painting. Closer in, the hillside drops away in a series of terraces, each one supported by a dry stone wall of grey limestone, each one planted with olives and figs and the occasional almond tree whose leaves are a paler, dustier green. The olive trees are ancient, their trunks gnarled and twisted into shapes that seem more sculptural than natural, their silver-green leaves stirring faintly in the slow, warm currents of air that rise from the heated earth. Between the trees the ground is bare and stony, the thin soil a pale, reddish-brown, dotted with tufts of wild thyme and rosemary that release their sharp herbal fragrance into the air whenever the breeze touches them. The scent drifts up to the terrace and mingles with the fainter, cleaner smell of the sea, creating a perfume that is both dry and fresh, earthy and marine. You reach into the small cloth bundle that you brought out with you and unwrap it on your lap, revealing a piece of yesterday's bread, a handful of olives saved from the morning's sorting, and a small wedge of white cheese wrapped in a fig leaf. The bread is coarse and dense, its crust dark and chewy, and you tear off a piece and eat it slowly, feeling the texture of it against your teeth and tasting the faint, nutty sweetness of the wheat. The olives are firm and slightly bitter, their flesh clinging to the stone, and you eat them one at a time, spitting the stones into your palm and placing them on the low wall beside you, where they will dry in the sun and later be scattered on the path. The cheese is mild and crumbly, made from goat's milk, and it carries a slight tang of the wild herbs on which the goats graze, a taste that seems to summarize the whole landscape in a single bite. You eat without hurry, without distraction, your body still and relaxed on the wooden bench, your eyes moving slowly across the view. The heat and the stillness and the simple food combine to produce a deep, wordless contentment that spreads through you like the warmth of a small, steady flame. The morning's work is behind you. The stones are loaded, the oil is dripping, and for this hour, this long, slow hour of the midday pause, there is nothing that needs your attention, nothing that calls for your effort, nothing but the fig tree's shade and the sea's calm surface and the bread and olives and cheese, the taste of the place they came from. A sound reaches you, a soft, shuffling footstep on the cobblestones of the lane, and you turn your head to see a neighbor passing by on the path below the terrace. He is an older man, his back slightly bent, his clothes the same simple linen and cotton as your own, and he carries a basket of figs on his arm, the fruit dark and soft, and giving off a sweet, honeyed scent that reaches you even at this distance. He stops when he sees you, raises a hand in a slow, casual greeting, and you raise your own hand in return. The gesture is unhurried and as comfortable as the day itself. He mentions, in a voice that is soft and unhurried, that there is talk in the harbour of ships, seen from the point, ships larger than the usual fishing boats, carrying many men and moving eastward along the coast. The words drift across the warm air and settle around you without weight or urgency, and the neighbour does not linger on them, does not speculate or question, but simply offers them as one might offer a comment on the weather or the state of the olive crop. You nod slowly, your gaze moving out towards the sea where, far out on the horizon line, there are indeed a few faint shapes that might be larger than the fishing boats, their sails catching the light in a way that makes them appear as tiny, bright specks against the hazy blue. The shapes are too distant to make out clearly, too far away to be anything more than a slight variation in the familiar pattern of the sea, and after a moment you look away, your attention returning to the terrace and the shade and the half-eaten piece of bread in your hand. The neighbour continues on his way, his footsteps fading slowly down the lane, and the silence of the noon reasserts itself, broken only by the soft, persistent buzz of a cicada that has begun its song in the branches of the fig tree. The sound is a steady, mechanical drone that rises and falls in slow, hypnotic cycles, and it blends with the murmur of the fountain and the distant, gentle whisper of the sea to form a single, continuous note that seems to be the very voice of the afternoon itself. You finish the last of the bread and the cheese, brushing the crumbs from your lap and watching them fall to the paved stones, where the ants will find them later. Small, busy workers who will carry the fragments away, piece by piece, in their own quiet, patient labor. You drink from the clay bottle of water that you brought from the fountain, the liquid cool and tasting faintly of the minerals of the hillside, and then you set the bottle aside and let your hands rest loosely in your lap, your fingers curled and still. The heat deepens, the light taking on the slightly hazy, golden quality of the afternoon's peak, and the view before you seems to soften and blur at the edges, as though the whole landscape is drowsing along with you. The distant shapes on the sea have moved further east, their bright specks of sail growing smaller and more indistinct, and soon they merge with the haze and disappear altogether, leaving the water empty and smooth and utterly serene. Whatever ships they were, whatever men they carried, whatever purpose drove them along the coast, they have passed now, moving on towards their own unknown destination, while you remain here, on this bench, in this shade, in this long, still pause at the center of the day. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face through the dappled shade, and you let your breathing slow until it matches the rhythm of the cicada's drone. The world around you recedes, the terrace and the fig tree and the sea and the distant, vanished ships all fading into a soft, golden haze, and you drift on the edge of sleep, not sleeping, not waking, but suspended in a state of perfect, peaceful stillness that is its own kind of rest. The pause stretches on, timeless and unhurried, a gift of the midday hour that asks nothing and offers everything, and you accept it with the same quiet, patient grace with which you accept every part of the long, gentle day. The first pressing is complete. The jars of golden oil are sealed and resting in the cool shadows against the back wall, and the collection basin now holds only the watery vegetation juice, a cloudy greenish liquid that trembles slightly with the vibration of your footsteps on the packed earth. You pour this watery residue into a wooden bucket, tilting the heavy stone basin carefully so that the liquid flows in a smooth, silent stream. And then you set the basin aside and carry the bucket outside into the piazza, where you pour the thin, bitter water around the roots of the wild rosemary that grows along the base of the wall. The earth drinks it in quickly, darkening for a moment before returning to its dry, pale color, and the scent of the rosemary rises briefly, sharp and clean, mingling with the warm, still air of the afternoon, before fading back into the quiet of the hillside. Back inside the workshop, you turn your attention to the press and the stack of mats that remains compressed under the weight of the limestone cairn. The second pressing must be done while the paste is still fresh, before the fibers of the mats dry out and the remaining oil becomes harder to release, and so you approach the press now with the same calm, methodical purpose that has guided every step of the day. The light through the windows has softened and warmed, the sharp golden shaft of earlier hours now broadening into a diffuse amber glow that fills the whole room with a gentle honeyed radiance, and this change in the light tells you that the afternoon is advancing, that there is still time for the work that remains but no cause to linger unnecessarily. You begin by unloading the stones, reversing the slow, careful process that you performed earlier in the day. The unloading is, in its way, as deliberate as the loading was, each stone requiring the same attention to balance and grip, the same steady stance and controlled lift. You start with the topmost stones, the smaller blocks that sit at the peak of the cairn, lifting them down one by one, and cradling them against your chest as you carry them back across the workshop to the row against the far wall. Your hands find the familiar depressions and ridges in the limestone, the same cool, gritty texture that you felt when you first lifted these stones hours ago, and you set each block down in its place with a gentle, solid sound that echoes faintly in the quiet room. The press creaks softly as each stone is removed, the beam rising by minute, almost imperceptible increments as the weight is reduced, and the stack of mats, compressed so tightly by the first pressing, begins to expand slightly, the fibers relaxing and the residual paste softening within the weave. You work your way down through the layers of the cairn, removing the long, narrow bridge stones and the broad, flat slabs and the compact, dense blocks that seemed so heavy when you first lifted them, and with each removal the press sighs and settles, the wooden beam releasing the tension it has held through the long hours of the first pressing. When the last of the stones has been carried back to the row and the wooden cradle is empty, you stand for a moment beside the press, your breathing deep and even, and you look at the stack of mats. It is still compressed, of course, still flattened by the pressure it has endured, but it is no longer under active load, and the edges of the mats where the paste had oozed outward are now dry and dark, the oil having been fully expressed. The stack sits on the pressing plate like a tired, satisfied thing, its work half done, and you reach down to touch the topmost mat, feeling the rough, oil-stiffened fibers against your fingertips. Now you begin the rearrangement of the stack, the preparation for the second pressing. You lift the wooden cap disc from the top and set it aside, and then, one by one, you peel the mats apart, separating them carefully where they have been pressed together by the weight and the sticky residue of the paste. The mats come apart with a soft tearing sound, not a violent sound, but a gentle, fibrous release, and as you lift each one, you can see the thin, flattened layer of olive paste that still clings to its surface. The fruit matter now reduced to a dark, leathery film that smells faintly of the oil it has already surrendered. You stack the separated mats on the pressing bench, handling each one with the same care you gave when they were clean and fresh, and you examine them briefly, noting which ones are still supple and which have begun to stiffen from the drying of the paste. When all the mats have been separated and restacked, you take a few moments to fold them differently this time, arranging them so that the sections that were at the center of the first stack will be at the outer edges of the second, and the sections that were at the edges will now move inward. This simple rotation ensures that the pressure will be distributed more evenly across the paste, drawing the remaining oil from parts of the mats that were less fully compressed in the first pressing. The rearrangement is a quiet, puzzle-like task, your hands moving the mats from one place to another, turning them slightly, adjusting their alignment, and through it all, the scent of the paste and the oil and the damp, warm fibers fills the air around you like a familiar, comforting cloud. With the mats rearranged, you now prepare the warm water that will help to release the last of the oil. You fill a small copper pot from the fountain outside and set it on the iron tripod over the small brazier that you keep in the corner of the workshop, for just this purpose. The brazier has been cold all day, its ashes grey and undisturbed, but now you place a few dried olive stones and a small piece of kindling into its grate and strike a spark with the flint and steel that you keep on the shelf. The spark catches, a tiny orange point of light that flickers and then strengthens, and you feed the flame with small twigs until a steady, low fire burns in the iron bowl. The copper pot sits over the flame, and you wait, listening to the soft crackle of the burning olive stones and watching the play of the firelight on the walls, a warm, dancing glow that contrasts with the steady amber of the afternoon sun. The water heats slowly, and when it is warm rather than hot, just enough to feel comfortable against your skin, you lift the pot from the brazier with a folded cloth and carry it to the pressing bench. You pour the warm water in a thin, controlled stream over the restacked mats, wetting each layer as you pour, the water darkening the fibers from amber to deep brown and softening the dried paste so that it becomes pliable and moist again. The steam that rises from the warm water carries the scent of the olive paste with it, a gentle, fragrant vapor that curls upward and then disperses, and you work the water into the mats with your fingers, pressing gently to help it penetrate the weave and reach the remaining oil trapped within. When the stack has been thoroughly moistened, you rebuild it on the pressing plate, layering the mats one on top of another with the same care and precision you used earlier, centering each disc and pressing it down gently so that the layers sit evenly and the stack is straight and true. The moistened paste squelches softly between the mats, a wet, contented sound that speaks of the oil yet to be released. And when the stack is complete and the wooden cap disc is back in place, you stand back and survey your work. The stack is slightly taller than before, the moistened mats having swelled a little, and it waits on the pressing plate with a patient, expectant stillness. Now the loading of the stones begins again, the second loading of the day, but this time the arrangement will be different, the pressure gentler and more gradual, so that the remaining oil is coaxed out rather than forced. You go to the row of limestone blocks and select the stones with a slightly different eye, choosing the smaller and medium-sized blocks rather than the great, heavy foundation stones. And you carry them to the press one by one, building a lower, wider can in the wooden cradle that distributes the weight more evenly and applies a softer, more sustained pressure. The rhythm of the loading is the same as before, the slow, measured walk between the wall and the press, the careful lift and placement, the soft, solid settling of each stone into its position, and the press responds with the same quiet creaks and sighs, the beam descending slowly, the stack compressing under the renewed weight. When the cradle is filled with the gentler arrangement of stones, you step back and let the second pressing begin. The dripping starts more quickly this time, the warm water having loosened the remaining oil so that it flows more readily from the mats, and soon the collection basin fills with the familiar sound of falling droplets, the soft musical plunk that you have come to associate with the quiet heart of the afternoon. This second oil is lighter in color than the first, a paler, more delicate gold with a greenish cast that catches the light in thin shimmering lines, and its scent is milder too, less peppery, with a soft buttery note that lingers at the back of the nose. You settle onto the low stool beside the press and resume the patient work of skimming, dipping the flat wooden spoon into the accumulating pool and lifting the golden layer into the waiting clay bowl. The motions are the same as before, the gentle dip and lift and pour, the steady rhythm that allows the mind to drift while the hands continue their careful work, and the afternoon deepens around you. The light through the windows shifting from amber to a warm rosy gold that tells of the approaching evening. The fountain outside continues its soft, liquid murmur. The goat bells on the hillside ring occasionally in the distance, and the workshop holds its quiet, oil-scented peace like a cup that is full and still. The second pressing takes less time than the first, the yield smaller, and when the dripping has slowed to a single drop every many seconds, and the oil layer on the surface of the basin is too thin to skim, you know that the work is finished. You collect the last of the oil in the spoon and transfer it to the jar, and then you rise from the stool, your body feeling the pleasant, deep tiredness of a day spent in steady, unhurried labor. The jars of second pressing oil you place beside the jars of the first, labeling them with small pieces of broken tile on which you scratch the date with a sharp stone, and then you turn your attention to the final task of the day, the evening clean. You unload the stones for the last time, carrying each one back to its place against the wall, and the row of limestone blocks is restored to its neat, patient order, ready for the next pressing, the next season, the next year. Then you dismantle the stack of mats, peeling them apart and carrying them outside to the stone basin by the fountain, where you will wash them clean of the spent paste and prepare them for drying. The mats are heavy with water and olive residue, their fibers dark and slick, and you kneel beside the fountain, dipping each mat into the cool, flowing water and scrubbing it gently with a stiff brush made from the fibers of a dried agave plant. The water carries away the dark, pulpy residue, leaving the mats cleaner with each rinse, and the sound of the scrubbing and the running water is a fresh, clean note in the quiet of the gathering evening. You drape the clean mats over the low stone wall that borders the piazza, spreading them so that the air can circulate and dry them before the night's damp settles in. The mats, now alight, washed out amber, steam faintly in the cooling air, and their clean, wet smell mingles with the scent of the wild herbs and the distant salt of the sea. Back inside the workshop, you scrub the wooden tools, the scoop and the spatula and the spoon, with a paste made from fine ash and water, working the grey mixture into the wood to draw out the oil and the odour before rinsing them in the fountain and setting them on the bench to dry. The press beam you wipe down with a damp cloth, removing the dust and the stray smears of paste, and you check the iron fittings for any sign of rust or wear, finding none. The floor you sweep with the bound twig broom, its worn bristles scratching softly across the packed earth, gathering the scattered olive pits and the limestone dust and the small fragments of leaf and stem into a neat pile that you collect in a wooden bucket and carry outside to the compost heap. The sweeping is a rhythmic, calming task, the broom moving in long, steady strokes that leave the floor smooth and clean, and when it is done, the workshop looks as it did when you first opened the shutters that morning, orderly and quiet, every tool in its place, every surface wiped and dry. You stop at the last of the oil jars, pressing the wax-sealed corks firmly into the mouths and wiping the rims clean, and then you carry the jars, one by one, to the cool, dark recess at the back of the workshop, where they join the rows of earlier vintages and earlier pressings, their dark shapes standing in patient silence against the stone. The scent of fresh oil lingers around them, a soft golden perfume that will fade slowly over the coming weeks, and you pause for a moment with your hand resting on the shoulder of the tallest jar, feeling the cool, smooth clay under your palm, before you turn away and let the darkness reclaim them. The evening light has deepened to a soft lavender grey, and the shutters must now be closed. You go to each window in turn, lifting the iron bar and swinging the heavy wooden panels inward, securing them with the same care you used when you opened them. The workshop dims gradually, the golden light of the afternoon giving way to a cool, shadowed stillness, and when the last shutter is closed, the only illumination comes from the small clay lamp that you light from the embers of the brazier and place in the niche beside the door. Its flame is small and steady, a warm flickering point of light that casts long soft shadows across the walls, and the press and the empty waiting spaces where the stones and the mats and the jars of oil have all returned to their rest. You stand in the doorway of the workshop, looking back at the quiet, orderly room, the great wooden press now silent and still, the floor swept clean, the tools on their hooks, the lamp burning gently in its niche. The scent of clean stone and wet fibre and the faint lingering trace of fresh oil hangs in the air like a benediction, and you feel the soft, deep satisfaction of work completed, of a day spent in slow, careful, productive labour that has harmed nothing and helped everything. Then you lift the wooden latch, pull the heavy door close behind you, and step out into the cool, quiet lane, the stones underfoot smooth and familiar, as the first stars begin to appear in the high, darkening sky above the hill town. The heavy wooden door of the workshop closes behind you with a soft, solid sound, the iron latch falling into its catch with a click that is muffled by the thickness of the old chestnut plank, and you stand for a moment in the lane, feeling the change in the air as the coolness of the evening replaces the dry warmth of the workshop interior. The sun has gone behind the hilltop now, and the light that remains is a soft lavender grey, a gentle fading glow that seems to rise from the stones themselves rather than fall from the sky. The narrow lane stretches upward to your right and downward to your left, its cobbles already beginning to gather the first cool moisture of the evening dew, and the air carries the mingled scents of wood smoke from a neighbour's kitchen, the dry perfume of wild thyme, and the faint clean salt of the sea far below. You begin to walk, your sandals making their soft, familiar sound on the worn stones, and the lane rises before you in a series of shallow steps that lead upward through the quiet town towards your room. The houses on either side are shuttered now, their wooden doors closed, their windows dark or lit only by the faint, warm flicker of a candle or an oil lamp somewhere deep within. The light that spills from these windows falls in thin, golden lines across the cobbles, and you pass through alternating bands of shadow and gentle illumination, your footsteps steady and slow, your breathing matching the rhythm of your pace. The town has settled into its evening quiet, a different quiet from the stillness of the midday pause. This is the quiet of the day's end, when the work is done and the doors are closed, and the people have withdrawn into their homes to eat their evening meals and speak to one another in low, murmuring voices that you can sometimes hear as you pass, a soft, wordless hum of conversation behind thick stone walls. You catch fragments of sound, the distant laugh of a child, the clink of a clay bowl being set on a wooden table, the brief, melodic phrase of a song that someone hums while stirring a pot. None of these sounds are loud or distinct, and they blend together into a gentle, continuous texture that is as comforting as the cool air on your skin. The lane narrows as you climb, the houses pressing closer together so that the strip of sky above you becomes a ribbon of deep violet scattered with the first pale stars. You can make out the familiar constellations as they emerge, the same patterns that have turned above this hill town for all the centuries it has stood here, and you glance up at them without pausing, your gaze tracing the ancient shapes with a calm, unthinking familiarity. A bat flits overhead, a small dark shape that darts and weaves against the sky, and then it is gone, swallowed by the shadows of the rooftops. You pass the fountain, its water still flowing in the darkness, the silvery stream catching the faint light of a lantern that someone has hung on the iron bracket above it. The sound of the water is the same as it has been all day, that soft, liquid murmur that has accompanied every part of your work from the first washing of the olives to the last cleaning of the tools, and you pause for a moment beside it, as you always do. You cup your hands under the stream and bring the cool water to your face, washing away the last traces of the limestone dust and the olive residue and the faint, salty perspiration of the day's labour. The water is colder now than it was in the morning, chilled by the evening air, and it makes your skin tingle and your breath catch slightly before you relax into the sensation. You drink a handful, tasting the mineral purity of the hillside spring, and then you straighten up and continue on your way, the coolness still damp on your cheeks and forehead. Further up the lane, the baker's shop is dark and silent, its oven long since cooled and its door barred for the night. The warm, nutty scent of the morning's bread has faded now, replaced by the faint, clean smell of the stone and the cool night air. A few doors beyond, you see the warm glow of candlelight through the small, deep-set window of a house. The same window where you glimpsed a flickering flame this morning, and you wonder, without any urgency or particular curiosity, if it is the same candle still burning or a new one lit for the evening. The thought passes through your mind and drifts away, leaving no trace, and you continue your slow, steady climb. You reach the small piazza, where the lane widens slightly, and the monastery bell tower rises against the darkening sky, its pale stone catching the last faint glow of the departed sun, so that it seems almost to emit a light of its own. The piazza is empty, its cobbles stretching out in a smooth, pale expanse, and the silence here is deeper, more complete. You pause for a moment, looking up at the bell tower, and you think of the single deep note that rang out this morning, the same note that has rung every morning for centuries, calling the monks to prayer and marking the beginning of the day for the town below. The bell is silent now, sleeping in its stone arch, and you feel a quiet kinship with it, a shared sense of rest after a long day's faithful service. The last stretch of the lane is steeper, and you climb it with the same measured, unhurried pace that has carried you through every part of the day. Your legs feel the pleasant, mild tiredness of the work, a sensation that is more like warmth than fatigue, and you know that when you lie down, your body will settle into the mattress with a deep, complete heaviness that will carry you quickly into sleep. The wooden door of your house appears ahead, its dark planks familiar, its iron handle cool and smooth under your hand as you lift the latch and push the door open. Inside, the narrow corridor is dark, but you know its dimensions so well that you walk through it without needing to see, your hand brushing the rough plaster of the wall to guide you. You open the inner door and step into your room, where the high window admits the soft violet light of the evening and the first breath of the night air, cool and clean, scented with the wild herbs from the terrace walls. You close the door behind you and stand for a moment in the center of the room, letting the silence and the stillness wrap around you like a familiar blanket. The room is exactly as you left it this morning, the wool blanket still rumpled on the straw mattress, the wooden stool still standing against the wall, the clay jug and basin still resting on their low shelf. You cross to the basin and pour a little water from the jug, then take a sprig of dried rosemary from the bundle that hangs on the wall and crush it between your fingers, releasing its sharp, clean fragrance into the water. You wash your hands and face again, more thoroughly this time, the rosemary-scented water carrying away the last of the day's dust and leaving your skin feeling clean and cool and refreshed. You dry your face on the cloth that hangs beside the basin, and then you loosen the cord at your waist and let your clothes fall away, hanging them on the wooden stool where they will wait for tomorrow. The night air through the window is cooler now, carrying the faint, clean smell of the sea and the softer, earthier scent of the hillside, and you stand beside the window for a moment, looking out at the view that you saw this morning in the pale light of dawn. The sea is invisible now, hidden by the darkness, but you can sense its presence, a vast, dark expanse that stretches away to the horizon, and somewhere out there, far beyond the reach of your sight, the ships that you glimpsed from the terrace have continued on their course. You do not know where they have gone, and you do not need to know. They are a part of a story that is not yours, a story that will unfold without you, while your own story, the story of the olive press and the limestone weights and the slow, patient dripping of the oil, has reached its quiet, peaceful close for the day. You turn from the window and lie down on the mattress, feeling the straw rustle and settle beneath you, shaping itself to the contours of your body with a soft, welcoming sigh. The wool blanket is warm and coarse against your bare arms, and you pull it up to your chest, your hands resting loosely at your sides, your legs stretching out and then relaxing into stillness. The ceiling above you is a dark, featureless plane, faintly illuminated by the soft glow from the window, and you watch it without focusing, your eyes half closed, your breathing slowing and deepening with each passing moment. The sounds of the town drift in through the open window, soft and distant, a gentle lullaby woven from the murmur of the fountain far below, the faint, rhythmic chirp of crickets in the dry grass of the terraces, the occasional, distant bark of a dog that is soon hushed into silence. These sounds are not interruptions, but companions, familiar voices that have sung you to sleep on countless nights before this one, and they blend together into a single, continuous note that seems to resonate with the slow, steady pulse of your own heart. Your body sinks deeper into the mattress, the tiredness of the day settling into your muscles and bones with a warm, heavy comfort that feels earned and clean. You think, without forming any clear thoughts, of the tasks you performed, the olives sorted and washed, the millstone turned, the paste spread on the mats, the stones loaded and loaded again, the oil skimmed and jarred and stored in the cool darkness against the wall. All of it is done now, all of it is complete, and the workshop waits in its own darkness. The great wooden press, standing silent and still, the clean mats draped over the wall, the tools white and dry on their hooks. Everything in its place, everything at rest. Far out in the darkness of the Tyrrhenian Sea, invisible and silent, the ships are sailing towards Marsala, carrying men whose names will be remembered, whose deeds will fill the pages of books you will never read. But you do not know any of this, and you do not need to know it, for history is not a single story, but a vast, quiet tapestry of countless threads, and your thread, the thread of the olive presser who rose at dawn and worked through the long golden day and walked home through the lavender twilight, is as essential and as valuable as any other. The ships will reach their shore, and the oil will fill the lamps, and both things are good, and neither thing requires your attention any longer. Your eyes close, and the darkness behind your eyelids is soft and warm and welcoming. Your breathing slows to a deep, regular rhythm, your chest rising and falling with the gentle, automatic certainty of a bellows, and the last faint traces of conscious thought dissolve like the dust motes in the morning light, drifting and swirling and then fading away into the calm, patient stillness that has been waiting for you all along. The window remains open, the night air drifts in, the stars turn slowly above the hill town, and you, the olive presser, descend into a sleep that is deep and peaceful and undisturbed. A sleep as calm and as restful as the long, quiet day that has now, at last, reached its gentle end.